Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this lecture. I'm a newbie on online lectures, so forgive my carelessness in handling the lecture later on. So we have Tan actually to help me coordinating all of this. I have seen recognized names in the list actually, so I hope this is a good reunion. And I hope you have a wonderful experience in our talk today on food choice in urban population. First of all, I would like to give acknowledgements to Professor Lawrence Haddad of GAIN, Tony Worsley of Deakin University, and Prof. Cor Gioklin, the senior editor of the Malaysian Journal of Nutrition, because what I'm going to be presenting is actually the thought of so many people, and among those are actually these high-fold prominent persons. Pretty much some of the slides that I pick are actually coming from this Global Nutrition Report 2016 that has been handed by Professor Lawrence Haddad to all of us. So I think this is a good chance for me to share what's inside the documents. Also, food systems and diet, where we are facing the challenges on the 21st century. This is a product of the Global Panels Group. Pretty much information and issues that I'm going to talk about is also taken from this particular documents. Before we start, though, I would like to share with you with this video that I would like each one of us to experience.
Encompassing 10 member states. These are insights. Largest economy by 2050. With a population greater than Europe, it has the third largest labour force in the world. 67 million households are currently part of the consumer class. This could double to 125 million by 2025. And ASEAN member states are collectively home to the world's second largest community of Facebook users. Interregional trade, as a share of the economy, is less than half that of NAFTA and the EU. This could deepen significantly with the ASEAN Economic Community. The AEC aims to boost regional trade and production, delivering freer movement of goods, services, skilled labour and capital. ASEAN includes 227 of the world's companies with $1 billion in revenues, or 3%. Debt is under 50% of GDP, far lower than the 90% share in the United Kingdom or 105% in the United States. ASEAN is the fourth largest exporting region in the world, trailing only the EU, the USA and China. ASEAN is a diverse group. The difference in average incomes over the member states is 7 times that of the EU. By sharing a common focus on jobs and prosperity, and by creating a seamless regional market and production base, ASEAN could prove to be the case in which the whole actually does exceed the sum of its parts.
So I hope that video set the tone of who the audience are today, because I have learned that many of us are coming from the ASEAN country from the list that was given by Tan. So I think that would also include some issues to be proud of as the region, because we are actually the number 3 market in the world. So we are also posted to potentials in terms of providing goods and services, as well as labors. And if we notice from the video, we are actually have so much lower deaths in comparison with England, UK, and US. So I think we have to be proud of that. And that goes also with this next slide that I have, that in terms of number of people in the in ASEAN region, we actually houses a quarter of the world's population. So we are big in numbers. It is a fast-growing economy. I think most of ASEAN member countries are now categorized as middle-income countries. We are no longer, like Indonesia, for example, we are no longer in the low-income categories. So it shows improvements over the years. Nevertheless, there is a vast gaps actually in terms of economic and technological development across countries in Southeast Asia that will have some consequences in health burden that will persist also in the region. Taken from the presentation of Professor Lawrence Haddad during the National Nutrition Day in Indonesia, he astonishingly provides this information that when we are talking about malnutrition, it is actually pervasive. It affects all 193 countries, and malnutrition affects 1 in 3 people, and this will persist to 1 to 2 people if the current condition continues and no correction is made. In addition to that, 800 million are hungry, 2 billion have most major micronutrient deficiencies. Interesting enough, 1.9 billion are overweight or obese. So all of these are numbers. The remaining 2 bullet points I would like to address here are referring to the progress. So overweight and obesity rates are rising in every country, including in our region, and in conjunction with undernutrition rates that is decreasing too slowly. So things to really be thinking about by nutritionists in the region. Now, when we are talking about the overview of each countries in the region, here I took the example of stunting, anemic women, and overweight proportion taken from the Global Nutrition Reports in 2016. I think the data really comes from data from 2013 onwards. So for example, here stunting. Thailand is actually the best performing, I should probably say that, ranked 46 compared to Timor-Leste ranked 132. That's the last rank for stunting, accounting for around 16% in Thailand and 57.7% in Timor-Leste. Now, to the audience, you can take a look where your country belongs in terms of these stunting issues. We are missing Singapore, I think maybe because there is no data in that particular issue or nutritional problem. Now let's go to anemic among reproductive age women. Vietnam is known to be the least. That's why Vietnam ranked number 4 for 14.1%, and then Cambodia ranked 160th with around 44% of anemic women. Indonesia is number 61 together with Timor-Leste. Now, those two are actually the overview of the undernutrition problem in the region. Now, what is actually the issue with the overnutrition? I took the liberty of taking this overweight among adults, where Timor-Leste is known to rank number 1 all over across the countries, and then Malaysia ranked number 3. So this is really to say that overweight is actually an emerging issue even in Timor-Leste, a country with a deprived nutritional situation. So with an additional 2 to 13% of obesity rates, then we can count for an issue that is larger than the table in the orange color. In the Global Nutrition Report, this is the target that is set in 2025. So we are addressing both undernutrition and overnutrition. We are aiming at cutting down the number of child stunting by 40% in 2025. We are aiming at cutting down to 5 child wasting. We are also putting so ambitious target that we would like no increase in childhood obesity or childhood overweight that link to the issue of the infant and young child nutrition practices. Exclusive breastfeeding is set to be at least 50% in 2025. And we are also aiming at half the rise of halting the rise of prevalence of all of this form of overnutrition, adult overweight, adult diabetes, and adult obesity. The question is then, can we achieve this target? First and foremost, I would like to introduce or discuss this framework that is addressed in the Global Nutrition Report on underlying drivers for improved nutrition status. I am very sorry for this small font of the slides, but I believe you can download the slides so you can learn also in specific information on what all of these drivers are all about. I also provide to Tan that there are the documents that I talk about. The 2 documents is also provided for you if you would like to download. It's basically downloadable and public domain. So first, I would like you to concentrate on this particular part. Let me practice my skill with this. Can I do this? Sorry, technical problem. Let me try again. I would like we concentrate on this area. So in this driver, they categorize the layers of drivers. So let me iterate this one first. This is actually these immediate processes are actually the point where when we can address these drivers properly, then it will influence directly to the nutrition outcome that we would like to achieve. So two drivers under this category, under these immediate processes, are health behavior that includes diet, physical activity, and other behavioral related outcome, as well as the biological factors that will lead to that will link to disease, for example, as well as genetics. But of course, when we are talking about genetics, it's less modifiable. That's why below this immediate processes, they point out the next important outcome, which is an underlying outcome that stipulated from all the environment surrounding us, human being, which is food environment, social environment, health environment, as well as living environment. So these 4 environments will influence how your immune processes can work in improving your nutritional outcome. What is also interesting is the point of these underlying processes that is depicted from this document. What is interesting there, issues related to societal processes, for example, income inequality, trades, urbanization, globalization, food system. This is something that we would like to talk about also for this the remaining lecture. Social protection, health system, agricultural development. We are talking about food production at the same time, as well as the issue of this women empowerment. So those underlying processes with an additional enabling processes that includes political commitment, governance, capacity to implement will at the end influence how much rates we can predict in improving the nutritional status of the people. In addition to that drivers, I would like also to point out several other additional thought that was once addressed by Professor Tony Worsley in one of his lecture when he was here in Jakarta. So he mentioned about these massive changes in the last 3 decades: market economy, foreign investment, globalization, and increased trade has tremendously taking place, and the issue of the rising of the middle classes as well as the higher education among our population influence somewhat the transition in terms of economy in our region, not to mention this rise of digital media. This is an example on how what we are doing now. I don't see the audience that is actually listening to this lecture and involving in the discussion later, but from the report, it's actually an issue of enhancing numbers of people that is covered by this lecture through the advancement of digital media and technology, information technology. The next one is changes in gender role, the entry of women into public society, the issue of stay-at-home dad or working from home. Those kind of issue is actually also a phenomena that influence or that takes some perspective in terms of the economic transition. Huge increase in longevity, people live longer because of improved health system, improved awareness, shift of people from poverty. Yeah, the rise of middle classes is actually the proof that some people do improve in terms of their income, so they leave the level of this poverty segment. And the last but not least is actually the dominance of neoliberalism and digital capitalism. This is also an issue of a macro level on how each and every phenomena that is listed here are interlinked and influencing each other. Now, in terms of social practices, they are also changing, and to a surprise, it all affects food consumption. For example, household structure. Well, Professor Tony gave an example of India. I think this is also valid for our region. Yeah, the collapse of extended family because we are now into more nuclear family. In the West, for example, the rise of dual income is taking place also as a single parents family. Gender, more women is now in the job outside household due to greater education, but it poses a question of who is then making the meals, care for the children, or taking care of the infirm of the sick people. The issue of time is also an issue of social practices. This hurriedness predicts child diet quality, and how this time linked to expectation from the society on parenting and mothering. You want to be called as a good mother, caring, providing a best quality of care to your children, and because of the time, you would like to expose that to the best you can. Digital economy. This is an interesting phenomena. Yeah, that blurring of work home time is an issue really in terms of partly I think because of this also that there are people now in the middle income. I mean, you can make money where you are working from home. Use of SMS and Facebook for socialization, and what is interesting is actually synchronization of family and friends activities at the same time. This is a slap in the face actually for myself. Like, for example, we sometimes do this. You go out with your family and then you go to a mall or a restaurant, you eat together with your family, but each and everybody on the table was actually holding your phone, and then you are texting and talking quote unquote, talking to your friends and not with your family. This is pretty much an issue on how we synchronize everything using this gadget thing. In terms of food consumer, these are what was noted by Professor Tony Worsley on what are the recent changes. So maternal employment outside home gives time pressure, And then because of that, there is, I mean, on top of that, there are also issues related to there are more single parents now, or mother and father, or spouses are all as dual income householders, leaving the house because of work, leaving the young dependent member of the household at home. But at the same time, the positive is that you have more income to earn your living and then provide good quality of life. The second one is the rising of the convenient products and big food, big in terms of size. Yeah, we know now that there are always, I mean, as a food provider at home, you tend to go for big portion because it is, you see, it is more cheaper in the sense that you are buying in bulk. Yeah, so that is actually an issue that was studied by Moody et al. In 2013 on how people see portion size nowadays. The third bullet points there is about this skilling of the household food gatekeeper. This skilling really means that you become less skillful. You become less skillful in terms of maybe starting from procuring good quality food, preparing the food, cooking the food, serving the food. So all of that takes place into the changing that we are facing now in the household level. The last one is the informalization of food practices. Things are getting informal. Things are getting the way you want it. I'm giving you an example on the next slide. For example, this one. In the past, this is actually a study comparing what happened in the 1960s. Anybody born in 1961? I wasn't even born then. But the point of this chart is comparing what happened in the 1960s to what is happening in the 2000s. So the chart shows us time and percentage of people doing that as meals. So in the 1960s, meals are closely linked to time. For example, this one, and this one, to show this is breakfast, this is lunch, and this is dinner, and maybe a little supper here. But the spike goes to these main meals. What happened in the 2001? Each and every time, people can eat anywhere, anytime. Yeah, so this is actually eating or drinking in or out of home by time of day, all days. So this leaves us to an evidence that you have no longer time boundaries for eating because you can eat anywhere, anytime. And that leaves a question whether or not we have time to prepare the food, to cook the food. So there is an issue of de-skilling your cooking ability or your food preparation ability, because then you can practically buy your food anytime, anywhere, and you can eat them anytime, anywhere. So this is an issue of informalization of food practices. So to reiterate, when we've been discussing all of these diseases, the global burden of diseases, and now in the report of Global Nutrition Report, they developed this chart on the point that risk factors of most global burden of disease are linked to diet. So all of those green are risk factors linked to diet. So we can see the top three are diet risk, the high systolic blood pressure, child and maternal malnutrition, as well as we have more down here, the high body mass index, high fasting plasma glucose, as well as high total cholesterol. So this risk factor of global diseases reflect back to us as nutritionists or public health nutritionists to think that the role of food, the role of nutrition is high, is important. So if diet is really an issue of risk factor of so many diseases, then what we can do about diet? A question of what is actually a high quality diet is addressed in the document of Food System and Diets. In that document, it is discussed that there is no universal definition yet, but there is a general agreement that high quality diet should at least include diversity of food that are safe, it's energy appropriate to age, sex, disease, and physical activity, as well as providing some essential micronutrients. This goes similar to WHO emphasis on what is a high quality diet that has to be started in early life, that it advises people to eat plenty of fruits and vegetables and all of those good foods, whole grains, fiber, nuts, and seed, but also limiting free sugar, sugary snacks and beverages, processed meats and salt, and replacing saturated and industrial trans fats with unsaturated fats. Now, what is the practice? What is the practice? The practice in this case is this one. I have two slides for this taken from Professor Lawrence Haddad presentation. This depicts the information on the changes. So when it is positive, it means an increase. When it is below, it is negative, so it means deficit or reduced. Within the period of 1990 to 2013. So Southeast Asia is actually the one in light blue. Southeast Asia is actually the one in light blue. Let me try this again. So this is Southeast Asia. Let's try to see how much our region perform in terms of consumption of this food. So when we are talking about fruits, we are all in positive balance, which is actually there is an increment. What is interesting in terms of vegetable, Indonesia, the region, the Southeast Asian region, is similar to what happened in the US and Canadian counterparts. So we have slight reduction of vegetable over the period of 1990s to 2013. Interesting enough that we increased so much on whole grain consumption, seafood, but a reduction in milk, increase in nuts and seeds, also fiber, as well as the PUFA, the polyunsaturated fatty acid. But this one is only one part. All good food. Now let's go to the next slide. And let us see again. Let us see again our region. Okay. What happened here is that there is a deficit or a reduction of unprocessed red meat consumption that shows a nice bump. It's around 30%, above 30%, an increase in terms of consumption of processed meat in Southeast Asia. Also, an increment in terms of sugar sweetened beverages, quite low in sodium. We do not have data actually with the trans fat here. So this implies we are improving in some good food consumption, but also we have an issue of improved or higher intake of some food that is supposed to be limited by WHO recommendation on high quality diet. So this is the overall point on those issue of diet related changes, that a major nutrient profiles involves shift largely on the energy density and refined carbohydrate, and there are a significant increment in calories coming from sweeteners in most of our region, and then large increase in edible oil and animal source food, and of course in exchange of that there is a reduction in a total fruits and vegetable consumption. Just to share here, our national survey on health in Indonesia shown that the population age above 15 years old are categorized as people who are consuming less fruits and vegetable accounts for more than 90%. So you can imagine how poor we are in terms of consumption of fruits and vegetables. At that end, I would like to share with you some studies that recently done by some of our students. I would like to acknowledge Ms. Hera Yusuf for her doctoral research recently. She is studying actually on how to develop recommended daily intake for fruits and vegetables among Indonesian adolescent girls. And these are the issues or the phenomena that was found during the process of development. So first, we think that adolescent despise fruits and vegetables. It's actually not true. I mean, they recognize, when we talk about recognition, it's actually they eat, they eat many kinds of fruits and vegetables, so that meeting recommended intake for fruits and vegetables among them is possible. And they have also good knowledge. I mean, when we are talking about normative knowledge that vegetable and fruits are good for your health, they are all in. But the issue is really with how much they can take in as a daily recommendation of fruits and vegetables. Here, there is this issue of preference. Fruits, because of the sensory issue, it tastes better compared to vegetables. Methods of preparation is also an issue where adolescents can prefer fruits better than vegetables. And using some modeling, combination of fruits and vegetables that was actually addressed by Ms. Yusuf here, is preferred by the adolescent, and it could meet a certain level of energy, daily requirement of fiber, as well as the requirement, 50% of the requirement of the vitamin and minerals. So there are promising steps that is done for introducing recommended daily intake for fruits and vegetables among adolescent girls. Another study linked with the issue of food environment, which is actually food store. A study in an urban slum area in Jakarta shows that small shop is associated with high consumption of snack. Street food vendors is associated with high consumption of mixed dishes, and modern food store is associated with consumption of fruits. All of this assessment of food store choices was done as part of a study on understanding the food pattern and obesity rates among urban slum in Jakarta. And what is interesting, in this area of Jakarta, modern food store is rarely utilized by these women. So understanding the role of small shop and street food vendors will help public health practitioners like us to work on what would be the most feasible and reasonable and relevant intervention to improve the urban slum dwellers' diet, especially the women. Another study in the same area involved a mapping on how much food stores are available in a kampung, in a village. So all of these numbers refers to, number one is convenience store, number two is a tavern. Tavern is a house turned into a small shops. Number three is grocery stores. Number four, snack stores. Number five is market. Number six, mobile food store or street food vendors. And number seven is non-food store for selling food. So if you notice in this map, there are so many number two and number four, and that reflects on how dwellers in that area is also the providers of food to the residents. And these are type of food that are sold in the tavern. So this is, I hope that there are Malaysian in the audiences. This is like nasi lemak or nasi uduk or rice, steamed rice with coconut milk. That is very common for breakfast. And then the side dishes is actually the fried vermicelli with some chips. All are fried. So you can imagine that this is one of the energy dense food available for the people in the area. The next one is actually fritters. So you name it, whatever vegetables or fruits you can fry, make it deep fry, and then it's going to be a very sexy snacks that people are loving it, to buying it. So that's why when I observe the area, it's like every meters you will have households selling this type of food because it is preferred by the residents. The next one are packaged drink. It's basically additional sugar to your daily sugar intake. So again, this is another favorite among children and also adults. So this map shows an issue related to food shopping behavior among these women in the urban slum of Jakarta. Another innovation from a colleague in Brunei is actually on the use of Audit Tool for assessing obesogenicity in the school environment. Again, the use of the tool was actually in a trial stage, where the point of the development of this tool was to find ways on how schools, principal and other school and staff can freely say or can freely share their observation related to wood environment in the school. An example presented in this slide, again, I'm sorry, this is too small, but the paper is Googleable, so you can download the whole paper if you like. Is actually reports coming from this 6 school on how much canteen are providing unhealthy food, unhealthy snack with some colored food, and then how much street food vendors are linked to the school food environment. I think that is also the case in many of the schools in Indonesia, maybe also in other parts of the region in ASEAN. One school also addressed an opportunity in which they can embrace recess for doing more physical activities among these young children. So this is actually a good tool that helps understanding food environment in the school level. Another study still about food environment and the role of street vendors. An online survey in 5 countries, in Australia, in China, Indonesia, Singapore, and Vietnam back in the year early 2014, resulting a phenomena that street vendors do contribute in our daily nutrition intake, nutrition consumption or food consumption. Food shopping behavior in street vendors are highest among Indonesian compared to other country and lowest in Australians. What is interesting, what was by what food by the Chinese, Indonesian, Singaporean, and Vietnamese are mostly linked to snacks, while whole meal is actually the food that was bought by the volunteers from Australia. Another interesting part is about the reason, yeah, the reason among Australian and Singapore, the reason buying food in the street vendor is because of the taste. For Indonesian and Vietnamese is because it is practical. When we are talking about practical, maybe it is related to easiness or time issue. And then among Chinese, cheap or the cost is actually the main considered reason. Another study I would like to share is one of the most recent study done by one of our students, Suci Latifa, back in the year 2016. She is doing this mapping, obesogenic environment mapping among adults aged 19 to 49 years based on district or municipal level. So what she is doing is that she is developing index. So she is using physical infrastructure, land use, and wood environment and make them into index and having some kind of cut-off. Like for example, for physical infrastructure, whenever in a district or municipal level they have, for example, health facility. So the score will go, the more health facility, the less obesogenic the environment is. But then don't forget, she is using these three indexes that coming from composite variables. So it's actually a tedious work that was done by her. But eventually, I just picked a map in Java because Jakarta is located in Java. The remaining map is actually available upon request to Ms. Suci Latifa. So this is what happened. All of those red area is actually the most area with obesogenic environment. So green mean middle and yellow, sorry, yellow means middle, green means the least obesogenic environment. So you see that this is Jakarta. Let me show you where Jakarta is and what is the color. This is Jakarta. Okay. An issue of interest on understanding such environment would help us to gear the intervention, the public nutrition intervention for achieving the target as relevant as possible. In addition to all the drivers that we have discussed, all the research findings that we have addressed, these are the long-term drivers of nutrition crisis as stipulated in the reports of the global panel. Yeah, that changes in size and age distribution of the population will influence how much nutrition crisis we are facing. Global food system will need to provide high quality diets to more than 2 billion additional people by the year 2050. So an issue of competition of good food is actually addressed. The second one, climate change. Over 500,000 net additional death because of the scenario where climate change is put into the modeling. Rapid urbanization, no question. The issue of, again, urban dwelling is always associated with undernutrition, with less undernutrition than rural population, but more diet-related obesity and chronic diseases and greater risk from food price volatility appear in the urbanization. So the same concern. I mean, we need to cover both rural and urban in a different way because of the different context that we are facing. Income growth, we have discussed also about this. An issue of rising in income helps you to provide a better food, but at the same time, it also creates a new problem related to overnutrition. A globalization of diets. This is something that I would like to also address in this today's lecture. the issue of diets, even in the poorest countries, we are increasingly affected by the growing global nature of food trade and trade-related industries. So this is the part of food system that we would like to address in the remaining slides that I would like to convey to you. The last one is competition in natural resources, because diets is the issue of natural resources, because it is unpredictable. So we have to be able to tackle it in a context specific ways. So the link of diet quality and food system. So when we are talking about diet quality, in the center round of the graph, it is actually the point where consumer have their own preferences, time, knowledge, and purchasing power that link closely with the food environment in terms of food promotion, food price, as well as the nutrient quality that is given in the food labeling information. Beyond the food environment, there is food supply. When we are talking about food supply, it's not merely an issue on agricultural production alone, but it's also on the food storage point of view, food transformation, as well as retail. Yeah. So therefore, in short, food systems really govern the safety, the nutrition quality, and the affordability of the food. It is really now the question on how can we make food system that is easier to make nutritious food choices for the public. We can say that food choice is pretty much free will. Consumers have their own co-responsibility, but unfortunately, they make choices in their immediate food environment. Immediate food environment really means to say what are close to them, what are accessible to them, whatever is easy for them to reach. So that will influence how much, given whatever knowledge they have, how much it's eventually driven or dictated by the food environment. So the question is, how available, affordable, and desirable as well as safe are these choices? Now, this is what needs to happen. I'm not aware of the institution of the audiences that is listening to this lecture, but I think this is a call for each one of us that whatever roles that we are having, I think the point of making policy maker to demand more of the food system to be more friendly for nutrition is actually a must. I mean, we can encourage policymakers or whoever is making decision to deal with nutrition and diet problem first, and then work back to change the food system. There are examples on how to deal with that food system later on in the next slide. So the third point that I would like to also reiterate, when we are talking about food system to be more nutrition friendly, then we are talking about opportunity to change that is involving private sectors. The last issue, factor in complex trade-offs between nutrition, greenhouse gas emission, and natural resource use is also an issue that we need to think about because of this competition of natural resources, because they are going to fade away and then the population is keep growing. So here is the thing. The point I was addressing in the previous slide is actually very daunting and complex. That policymakers need more support. Professor Lawrence Haddad addresses these examples of policy space in terms of many levels or many area of food system. So, for example, at this point of production, what is currently done is biofortification, actually, to achieve more nutritious, more nutrient, certain nutrient level in the food. But then what is necessary to be done is actually an issue of more research and development on production and maybe on how to cultivate easy cultivation of fruits and vegetable and pulses. The issue related to storage, for example, the issue related to storage. Policy space can go into, for example, an issue related to trading standards, for making trading standard for food composition for key food, or redefining sanitation and sanitary and phytosanitary standard to include diet quality. We are talking about the issue of aflatoxin, for example, that is due to storage. Aflatoxin coming from peanuts and other nuts due to storage. And we would like, and we know very much that nuts or other nuts product are basically nutrient dense food. So we would like also to encourage people to eat good food without compensation of other toxins. So we are encouraging policymaker to be able to make some innovation on this particular policy space. Transformation, for example, transformation in this case. Transformation. We are talking about, for example, putting a corporate tax rates that incentivize higher nutrition quality product lines. So we are encouraging corporate to take part on being able to provide nourishment, not merely food, but also nourishment. And we need policymaker to put an umbrella of policy on these particular efforts. An issue related to retail, another example, issue related to retail. We are talking about, for example, making some incentives to street vendors to use healthier ingredient or to produce healthier foods for the school children. This is pretty much relevant based on the slides that I have shown before, yeah, because street vendors are linked pretty much to our school in our region. Last but not least, the issue related to food environment. We are talking about, this is an innovation, potential novel, Dr. Haddad say, potential novel maybe to put tax to incentivize nutrition retail zone. I have seen an example, I think in the West, that they provide zoning area. So the greener the zone, it means that the greener the zone, it means that it is the food cell in that area is providing more nutrition dense. With that kind of incentivification, it is also educating consumer to choose more healthier food, and also educating the private sector at the same time on how they can contribute in making healthier choices for the people. That is all food system. Another example I picked from one of Professor Korgyoklin presentation on this project of gotong royong. I know that in this audience we have many Indonesian. Gotong royong is also a term that we understand very well in our custom. It is about selflessness and working together. So from the side of the community or the consumer, the innovation from this paper really tells on how sense of ownership, community empowerment, and a spirit of volunteerism were important factors in making the community health program a success. So I think with this, it is valid, I believe, in many other parts of the country in the ASEAN region, that we have this sense of community togetherness. So I think this is another innovation that we can think of and discuss later on how we can best approach a better food choice in our setting. I would like to end my presentation with this framework of thoughts that based on what we have discussed, eventually I would point out these three main factors. One is from the point of the consumer. Second is from the point of view of the food provider. And then third is from the point of view of the policymakers. So when we are able to make an orchestra of these three important elements, we are thinking of a better way of having a food choice that catering the needs of the people. Look at how beautiful it is if we can create this mutual benefit of demand and supply, where we are creating awareness among our consumer for healthier food, demanding of healthier food, and then the supply is ready to provide them with healthier, with an access for safer and healthier food, and then commitment from the policymaker link the supply and demand into a policy space that is operational. Together with all of this measure of education, partnership, and monitoring, we are aiming at working together in the surveillance and coordination for a better food environment and eventually providing better nutrition for the people in the region. I think I would like to end my session from then on. So maraming salamat, terima kasih, Jason Timbade, Oke, and Kamen. I hope I am pronouncing all those dialect properly. Okay, Tan, I think I'm done. So maybe we can have a Q&A session.